Hello everybody, this is MK and I'm back with Unit 2 for Turning Points in South African History, 1960, 1976 and 1990. 1976 Soweto Uprising. In the 1960s, the government introduced more oppressive legislation to prevent any further riots. Anyone could be jailed for 90 days without a trial. This was later changed to 180 days. Nelson Mandela illegally left the country to set up training bases for MK. When he came back, he was arrested outside Howick in Natal and sentenced to 5 years in prison. The ANC had their secret headquarters at Liliesfield Farm in Rivonia in the white area of Johannesburg. They had devised a plan called Operation Mayobuye to overthrow the government using armed revolution and guerrilla tactics. On the 11th of July 1963, the security police arrived at the farm in a laundry truck. They arrested all the main ANC leaders and charged them with 221 acts of treason. At the Rivonia Trial, Nelson Mandela gave a long speech, which today has become famous throughout the world. Thabo Mbeki, who was in exile, persuaded many countries to put pressure on South Africa not to give the ANC leaders the death penalty, but rather a life sentence. On 14 June 1964, Nelson Mandela and 9 other leaders were sentenced to life imprisonment on Robben Island. This was a huge setback for the freedom struggle, which only recovered in the 1970s. Steve Biko and the Black Consciousness Movement as a cause of the Soweto Uprising. In the 1970s, black students formed the South African Students' Organization under the leadership of Steve Biko, a medical student. He had been influenced by the Black Consciousness Movement in America. The BCM inspired young black people to be proud of who they were and to stand up for their rights. He began to spread the ideas of the BCM in South Africa, which included Black is beautiful, Black people must have their own identity, Black people must strive for freedom by themselves, Black people are not inferior to white people. BCM ideas spread very quickly throughout South Africa, and Biko became a great threat to the government. He was banned, but this did not stop him from secretly traveling around the country to address student meetings. In August 1977, he was arrested. 3 weeks later, it was announced that he had died from a hunger strike. An inquest later proved that he had been severely beaten by the police and suffered spinal damage. SASU was banned. Grievances of Soweto school children as a cause of the Soweto Uprising. School children in Soweto were frustrated and angry that their parents and school governing bodies were not doing anything about the following problems: lack of facilities like classrooms and sports fields, unqualified teachers. The government allocated 644 Rand per white pupil per year and 42 Rand per black pupil per year. Poverty and overcrowding of their surroundings. They wanted democracy and equal opportunities. Poor results and a high dropout rate. Limited curriculum. In 1975, a new language policy for black high school learners in southern Transvaal was introduced. Children in Soweto had to be educated in both English and Afrikaans. General science and practical subjects were taught in English, mathematics, history and economics in Afrikaans, and religious studies and physical education in the mother tongue. Most of the teachers and children could not understand Afrikaans, and it was not liked. In Indian, colored and white schools, a single language was used. Principals protested unsuccessfully, and in some Soweto schools the teachers refused to teach classes. By May 1976, learning activities came to a halt. Spiraling events after the Soweto Uprising. 16 June 1976 was a turning point for South Africa. The resistance to apartheid became more intense, and the rest of the world put huge pressure on South Africa to change. It would take another 14 years, however, before apartheid ended in the aftermath of the uprising. Schools were closed and learners had to repeat the year. Demonstrations were held throughout the country and protesters clashed with the police. Between 500 and 600 people were killed and over 1,000 people were wounded. Violence broke out and vehicles, buildings and schools were set on fire. Thousands of black pupils left the country to be trained in military camps for MK. Thousands of people were arrested and locked up. The government banned 17 anti-apartheid organizations. Government spies infiltrated the ANC and crushed any future protest campaigns for a few years. The government changed its language policy and Afrikaans was not enforced in schools. Learners and the black community asked for the total abolishment of apartheid laws. The tragedy of the Soweto Uprising is remembered as a public holiday on 16 June each year, called Youth Day. Long-term consequences for resistance and repression. The international community reacted with horror and shock to the events in South Africa and increased its resistance. As a result, South Africa's economy entered a period of recession. The rand devalued, causing economic instability. Gold and diamond shares dropped on the stock exchange. Countries applied economic sanctions and refused to trade with South Africa. Large companies disinvested and left South Africa. The Afro-Asian bloc increased pressure on the UN to impose cultural and sporting boycotts on South Africa. This meant that music groups and sport teams could no longer tour South Africa. That is all for today. Thank you for watching and most importantly learning. This is MK's class signing out.